to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And today, I'm back in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome Dr. Todd Finkle, author of Warren Buffett, Investor and Entrepreneur. Todd, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, and I really enjoyed this book. I mean, everybody, there's nobody on the planet practically that doesn't know who Warren Buffett is. He's the Michael Jordan of his space.
That's for sure.
So, can you first, before we go into the book and about Warren Buffett, can you give us a rundown of your professional background?
First of all, I guess I want to say thanks for having me on the show. And I respect entrepreneurs enormously. I've spent a lot of my life studying entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And you're certainly an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, as you said earlier. And I respect what you do, and all that you're a teacher. You told me, I just learned that, and also a serial entrepreneur. And I think it's great, Mark. I think what you're doing is wonderful. And thank you from all of us for doing what you do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that for sure. So I'm so glad to have you, and all these folks who have tuned in are glad to hear about what you have to say about your experience of writing this book and knowing Warren Buffett. So let's start with your background. Tell us about how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, kind of succinctly, I'll tell you that I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where the Buffett family grew up. And I actually went to high school and junior high school with Peter Buffett. And he was a couple of years older than me. And I hung around with a group of people, really bright people. And we used to eat lunch every day in the cafeteria. And Peter was one of them. And so I used to see Peter every day in the cafeteria, and we'd talk and get to know each other a little bit. This was in 1976, and Berkshire Hathaway in 1976 was trading for $69 a share. And nobody even really knew who Warren Buffett was, at least at our lunch table, because nobody talked about it. And Pete was just a guy with, baseball cap and ripped up jeans. So he didn't act like he was anything special. So Warren, when he read my book, and, I sent it to him. I had to get approval for him to approve me of publishing the book. He said one of the things that he really liked about me publishing the book was that I was an original guy that knew the family before they got really wealthy and famous. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, so I went on to school, and I went to the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, for my undergraduate degree. And after that, I started a investment partnership with a friend of mine, and we were studying the Elliott wave theory, which is more technical analysis stuff. That was really popular back then. I did that for a couple of years. And then I went on and got an MBA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I had a business while I was going to school there. So I already had two businesses by the time I was 27. And then I went to the Mercantile to try and get a job there in Chicago. But they were only going to pay me $7 an hour. And that wasn't even enough to pay off my student loans. So I kind of blew that off. And but it was a good experience interviewing down there. And then I went back and got a PhD in entrepreneurship. And this was in 89 to 93. And there were only, as we were talking earlier, there were only two PhD programs in entrepreneurship in 1989. That was Penn, which is where you used to teach, and Georgia. So I ended up going on and getting a PhD in entrepreneurship and strategic management. And so I've been teaching entrepreneurship at a couple different schools. I started a couple different programs that are nationally ranked. Our program here is nationally ranked. I founded that program. And related to Buffett, or I don't know if you want me to wait and talk about that, but I started getting into him. I've always been into him because I grew up in Omaha and I knew the families and his impact on Omaha, which is amazing, and a lot of great stories. But I really started to get into him back in 2007 when my cousin, Steve Nog, told me that he was inviting schools to Omaha for a day to hang out with him. Uh,
So yeah, so let's take that as the next step here. And with so many books on Warren Buffett, my favorite being Snowball, why write this one?
well, it didn't come. Uh, I didn't like just kind of wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to write a book on Warren Buffett," because of what you just said. Because there's been a lot of books that have already been written on him, and so what I was doing for like the first 9 years, I was doing research, and I was hanging out with Warren Buffett with my students. I took 6 groups of students to go visit him, and we would go have lunch with him, have a Q&A with him for 2.5 hours, and then visit some of his subsidiaries in Omaha, Nebraska Furniture Mart and Borsheim's. And so I started to document all this stuff, and it was a lot of fun. The idea of writing a book on Warren Buffett never even entered my mind uh, while I was doing that, um, until after about 9 years, I started to think, hey, I have a lot of really good quality information, um, not secondary information, but primary research that hasn't been anywhere else before because I'm hanging around with him. So I thought, that, and I started reading all these books on Warren Buffett, and I noticed some gaps in the literature. So some of the gaps, of course, was that convinced me to go ahead and write the book were, how many people from Omaha wrote a book on Warren Buffett? Zero. How many people knew the family? Zero. And I had connections, and I interviewed Susie Buffett for the book. And Charlie, most of the Buffett books didn't have anything about Charlie Munger.
I
I put
noticed
in
that.
I
Yeah.
put in a chapter on Charlie. I love Charlie, or I loved Charlie, and it's really sad that he passed away. Uh, I was so much into Charlie Munger that I did 2 chapters on Charlie Munger, and my publisher, Columbia, told me to knock one out or combine them into one. So I did that, and but I love that chapter in the book. Again, there haven't even really been a lot of books on Charlie Munger. All of a sudden, after he died, everybody's writing a book on Charlie Munger. That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
But
because I was going to say that would be a great book because he's kind of the mystery man behind Warren Buffett. And I mean, I didn't realize, and we'll talk more about this, but I didn't realize they knew each other since like elementary school.
They didn't know each other at the same elementary school, but they went to the same one because Charlie was 6 years older than Warren.
Right.
But
But then we need
they
to go
also
back and
worked at the same store, Warren's grocery store, the family grocery store, and there's some interesting stories there about their Ernest was his
yeah, and
grandfather.
you talk about that in the book, which was very
Yeah,
interesting.
and he got a lot of his values from Ernest. His grandfather is very stern, very frugal, very hardworking, very humble. And when Warren was working at the grocery store, he told this story, and it was this is really a big deal. It- it- he had a friend and him were it was a blizzard one day, and they were outside, and they were shoveling for like 12 hours straight trying to get rid of all this snow because all these trucks were trying to come in with food for the store, and they're out there shoveling and everything. And he goes back to Ernest at the end of the day, and Ernest goes, "Well, how much money should I give you?" And Warren didn't really know how much he should ask for, and Ernest goes, "A dime is too little, and a dollar's too much." And so Warren didn't know, and that was a big lesson for him because he had no idea how much he should ask for. And he realized when he did ask that he asked for too little. And he learned a great big lesson there from that experience. But he also learned from that experience that he never wanted to do manual labor ever again. And he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And he realized because of that at age 10 that money would bring him to that place where he could be an entrepreneur and do his own thing.
So what's your definition of an entrepreneur?
Well, there's over 60 different definitions of entrepreneurship.
You've been teaching it a very long time.
Yeah, everybody's probably going to have a different definition. My definition is more about opportunity seeking behavior that can be utilized in any organization. Most people think of it as just starting a company. I don't look at it that way. Sure, starting a company is part of it, but I think that, looking for opportunity within any organization. I mean, I look at you're a professor and you're doing this. You're definitely an entrepreneur. I consider myself to be an entrepreneur, and I'm in academia, and I am writing a book on Warren Buffett, and going on podcasts and talking to people. And so, you can be an entrepreneur or a corporate entrepreneur in a bigger organization, or a entrepreneur, a nonprofit entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. And I think Buffett has been all of those. Even when he was a kid, he started out selling lemonade when he was 4. And then he did all of these entrepreneurial things as a kid. He was a serial entrepreneur by the time he was like 5 or 6, doing things.
And
And
he owned a farm, right? That he
yeah,
rented
yeah,
out at what, 13 years old.
yeah, yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's
He owned
crazy.
a 40-acre farm when he was so young.
Yeah.
Um, and his basis, I think the most interesting thing that I learned from writing the book was how Warren's background was tragic. Most people think he was just this rich guy. Oh, he never had to worry about anything. But really, Warren grew up in the Great Depression. His father lost his job, lost all the family money. Uh, his father wouldn't give him a job at the grocery store, but he did give him, groceries, but
Yep.
he had to pay it back, and so that was the biggest thing that influenced him. And his mother started to freak out, and she already had some health issues, and she used to take out some abuse on Warren and his 2 sisters. So there we go. You're back.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I was
But
never gone.
but this had a huge impact on Warren because his mother's telling him he's worthless. And how would you feel if your mom was telling you you were worthless when he was so young? So um not so long after that, here he is being an entrepreneur selling lemonade on his neighbor's driveway. And then he's off to the races with doing all these entrepreneurial things. And so you have he doesn't really think that much of higher education. I know this is not the appropriate thing to be saying, but he'll say it to you. Uh, he thinks the best thing that you can do is get work experience, get business experience. And he thinks the most successful business people are people with the most business experience that think way outside of the box. And he didn't want to go to college. His father forced him to go to college. So he went to the University of Pennsylvania for a couple years. He wanted to drop out after the first year, and his father didn't let him. And then he wanted to drop out after the second year, and he did drop out of college. And he went back to Nebraska because his father wanted him to get a degree. And this is a great story is that while he was at Nebraska and Lincoln, he started delivering papers again. He used to do that when he was younger, but he had 50 people underneath him delivering papers when he was 19 years old at Nebraska. And after that, he got his degree and then he applied to Harvard, and Harvard rejected him for school. They said, "You're too young, go get some work experience." And then he ended up at Columbia because of the books that he read of Benjamin Graham, The Intelligent Investor and Security Analysis. And Benjamin Graham had the biggest impact on him, really, related to the stock market. Uh, and that's where he initially got exposed to value investing. He was probably around 20 years old then.
So I have a couple questions for you about entrepreneurs. After, and I always ask this about people who write books on entrepreneurs, are highly successful entrepreneurs born or can they be developed?
That's a tough question. I don't know if there's a real good answer to that. Again, it's so subjective. I've taught this for 34 years. Um, on the first day of class when I teach entrepreneurship of the semester, I draw a picture on the board of a refrigerator, and I'm a terrible artist, so most of the kids, I ask them what it is, and nobody knows what it is, and I tell them it's a refrigerator, and then I open the door and I say, "Now tell me what's in the refrigerator," and uh, none of them know, and I tell them there's nothing in the refrigerator. This is what entrepreneurs are. They're hungry, and I can't teach you that. I can't teach you to be hungry, from my experience. So what usually happens by the end of the first day is the kids that are the real entrepreneurs are smiling after I do that. And they come down and they want to talk to me at the end of class, and they're all excited, and they're either an entrepreneur already or they have an idea and they're excited, and the kids that aren't as entrepreneurial are just kind of giving me frowns or have their mouths open. Being an entrepreneur is pretty rare.
And I've read recently that the percentage of people going into entrepreneurship has actually been decreasing the last few years.
Why do you think that?
I think that some people, if they've grown up in an entrepreneurial household, and which is going to be one of my next questions here, is seeing that the parents have worked so hard, 6, 7 days a week, that they want more of a balanced life. And that's a very hard thing to get as an entrepreneur, is having life balance, work-life balance. And so I think that there's even my daughter has a global communications company, and she has great clients all over the world. But she said, I don't want to grow it so big that the company owns me. I don't own the
Yeah.
company anymore. And I think I hear a lot of entrepreneurs, and what drives you, of course, is that you have a mission. And that's what really drives you at the end of the day. It's never about the money, it's always about the mission and wanting to make a significant difference. You mentioned coming from a family of entrepreneurship. History encourages future family entrepreneurs. Is that like any profession where people come from a line of policemen, firemen, or anything that people typically join like the family business? So if your family is entrepreneurial, you typically want to be an entrepreneur. It's in the blood almost.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We actually did research on this, and we wrote an article that people that have a family member, either like a parent or a grandparent that's an entrepreneur, are more likely, significantly more likely to be an entrepreneur. So I would imagine that it would be similar in other areas as well with people.
How much is Buffett's personality and down-to-earth persona from being a Midwesterner, and how different do you think he would have been if he had grown up in New York? I mean, he went to college there, but that was only a short period of time.
But he also worked on Wall Street for a couple of years under Ben Graham at his partnership. That's where he became a millionaire initially at the age of 25. Um, Ben Graham actually told him not to live in New York City after he worked for him, after Graham shut down retired from his partnership. And Warren's father told him not to live in New York City as well. Um, and so I think those people had a big effect on him, and he wanted to come back to Omaha. He was already wealthy by the time he was 25. He didn't have to work anymore. He didn't have to worry about money because he was so smart. He could live on the interest and dividends and capital gains from the money he made from the partnership when he worked there on Wall Street. But um, yeah, so I think he loves Omaha, and he loves it because he can go into a McDonald's or a Village Inn, which is a pancake place there, and nobody really will bother him too much. They may, say hi to him and everything, but he would just get bomb blasted in other places if he went there. He doesn't need a security guy around him all the time in Omaha. You know, about I've been to the last 14 shareholder meetings, and I've seen how a good indication of this is his house. I always drive by his house every time I go to Omaha, and there's no like guards there or anything like that. The only thing I've noticed at his house, whereas LeBron James has a 24-hour security detail in front of his house, but he's just got this little gate. That's it. So he's a very humble guy. Midwestern people tend to be hardworking, very humble people, and he's very indicative of that. He's like your grandfather. He has nothing to prove. He does what he loves every day, and he'll tell you, I love what I do and I love the people that I work with. That's why I do what I do.
You mentioned that by the time he dies, he'll give away $100 billion. I read his kids and ex-wife had, but I thought he was giving it to the Gates Foundation because they have a process and methodology for selecting causes and organizations. What causes inspire him? What does he like to support?
Well, that's been on shaky ground here over the past couple of years, with Bill Gates' divorce.
Uh,
Uh, and Warren was on the board of the Gates Foundation. And I think he resigned from that. And of course, Bill, not exactly sure where Bill is on that, but I I get the feeling from talking to Susie when I interviewed her that there's going to be a lot more money coming her way. So his three kids each have their own foundation, and like Susie's got two different foundations. She's like really into education and helping people that can't afford to go to school, and women's rights. And Pete's like really into women being abused. They've got a whole, if you go on their foundation websites, they've got all these different causes that they're into. And of course, Warren is very happy that they're doing all of this. And Howie, who is the oldest son, is really into farming. And so he does a lot of time over in Africa helping people in Africa with their farming.
So the children have taken up the mantle of giving away the money.
Yeah, initially it was 2 billion per child, and the majority of it was going to the Gates Foundation. But then after the divorce, I read an article that things are going to be changing. And I can't quote exactly how it's going to be changing. I don't even know if Warren has even talked about it, but that'll be something to look for. And we may not even know it until Warren dies.
Let's talk about what's the profile of the kind of leaders he liked to invest in. The industries have a wide range from furniture to candy to technology, and certainly gender doesn't really matter to him because he invested that woman who had a furniture business. I think it was in Omaha, right? So what kind of managers, leaders does he like to invest in?
Uh, so I'll give you an example. Is This is actually one of my favorite stories about Warren investing in a company. So her name is Mrs. Blumkin or Mrs. B,
Yeah, that's it.
and
Yeah.
she was born in Minsk, Belarus, and grew up there. And she never went to school, and she ended up working at her mother's store. And at 6, by the time she was 16, she was managing 6 people. And then she ended up getting married, and her husband, to get out of the draft, moved to the United States. And then she waited to come to the United States, and she had to go through the border, the Russian-China border. And in order to get through the border, she didn't have a passport or anything. She bribed the guards, and she said that she was going to bring back a bottle of brandy to them when she came back, and they let her through. And she ended up making it to the United States through Seattle, and she ended up being in Omaha with her husband. And in Omaha, what they did was he started a pawn shop, and she started a used clothing and used furniture store in the basement of the pawn shop when she was 37, I want to say, 37 years old. And she grew that through hard work, 70 hours a week. And she sold cheap and she told the truth. And she grew that into the largest private furniture store in the country in Omaha, Nebraska. And she didn't know English. She didn't know how to write English. She didn't know how to speak English. And she was able to do this. This is why Warren came in and bought it. I think for like 55 million on a 2-page contract and a handshake. But this kind of stuff really influences Warren because, his philosophy, he'll tell you is that, again, the most successful business people that he's met in his life are the people with the most business experience that think way outside of the box.
And
And
he keeps the managers, right? Like he kept that family continued and still runs that
exactly,
business. And every
exactly.
time he invests in a company, it's rare that he just I don't has he ever gotten rid of a management team when he bought in? He typically
No,
invests in them.
that's part of the deal that he looks at. He looks at the people. Can he trust the people? And he
You
likes to
mentioned in
make
the
it
book
like
his
eight.
criteria.
He
What is
like
his criteria?
on purchasing a company or investing in a company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he'd rather invest or not invest, but buy the company outright. That's what he would prefer to do. Uh, so the problem is now is he has $157 billion in cash, and that's not going to really move the needle very much. Actually, I read an article today that um, over the past 20 years, he's about even with the S&P 500 because he's gotten too big. And even at the last shareholder meeting, Charlie and him were talking about, would you rather invest in the S&P 500 or Berkshire Hathaway? And Warren said, he said the S&P 500, and Charlie said Berkshire Hathaway. So that was eye-opening when he said that. Warren didn't even say to invest in Berkshire Hathaway. But some of the things, if you look at companies that he'll look at before he invests is he'll look at is it selling at a discount? Is it undervalued? What's the valuation? And it's tough to put a valuation on things. For me, it was the hardest thing in writing the book was trying to figure out what the valuation formula is. And I asked Warren when I was out to lunch with him, I go, how do you value a company? And he said the discounted cash flow. So I definitely added that to the book. I put 3 chapters in the book on value investing, and one chapter was looking at Apple, and I took the reader through how to value Apple, all the steps and all the ratios that you would want to look at and what they should be, return on equity, net income, and things like that. But
Does he have and we have a question, actually, we have a question from the audience, and then I'll get to my question. Warren Buffett's a major investor in Apple. What makes Apple as a company interesting for him? Is it only the money Apple is making, or is there another story behind his investment? Question from the audience.
well, I don't think that Warren initially invested in Apple. Their first investment in Apple was in 2016, and he has 2 new co-CIOs. They're not so new anymore, but Ted Weschler and Todd Coombs. One of them, I think, invested in Apple because Warren always kind of ran away from technology companies. So it was kind of a surprise that they invested in Apple. And Warren and Charlie, all of a sudden, they realized that I think they started buying it at around 109 or 106. And today it's somewhere around 185. And they've made a lot of money on Apple, but it's problematic in my opinion. Apple, they have at one point they said they'd buy all of Apple, but now you have all this stuff going on with China. This is very problematic, and China is not buying as much Apple product. It's down like 20%. And a lot of the operational stuff is going on in India now. They're making all this the Apple product. So there's a lot of variables that are questionable that are out there related to Apple.
What changed his mind in investing in technology companies, or is that mostly driven by his associates and he knows they're smart people and kind of goes along with that?
I would say exactly what you said, that was his co-CIOs that started to get into this stuff. I gave a presentation at University of Iowa a few years ago. I think it was 2017, and somebody asked me, everybody always asks me, basically, how do you make money when you invest in, everywhere I go. And so I put up a slide, and it was Amazon, and I said, this is who Warren Buffett loves, and he says that Jeff Bezos is the best manager in the world, and da 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 da. Yet, what I don't understand is why he has never invested in Amazon. So, but he eventually did. He owns just a little bit of Amazon now, which I still think is a mistake because I think it's definitely a great company with a great moat.
You mentioned it in the book that Warren Buffett said you only need 5 good ideas to get rich. What does he mean by that?
Um, I think, a really good idea doesn't come around very often. And you've got to really uh, put your money where your mouth is. And in his career in running Berkshire Hathaway, the stock market has gone down 50% 3 times. So 3 times, that would be a really good time. And he actually came out in an op-ed in the New York Times during the Great Recession and said to buy stocks. And that was in October. Uh, of course, I didn't buy, but the market went down another 20% after he said that. So it went down a total of 50%. But, there are times when, he ended up buying a bunch of Coke in the 87 crash, and he's had 400 million shares of Coke. And I would say that was one of his better investments. American Express, when he had his partnership, was down like 50%. And he ended up investing in that and making a lot of money during his partnership years. And I think that's still his fourth or fifth largest holding that he has. And Apple, of course, is his largest investment that he has. Now, what's troubling, again, I'm going to go back to what's troubling me about Apple is, all the stuff that's going on. And he sold some last quarter. you know, I, I can't remember the last time he sold any. It was only 1%, but it was he sold 1% of Apple of his shares.
You wrote in the book that, and I was shocked to read this, that 45% of Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio was Apple stock. And I've read that he and Charlie Munger warned people about having an over concentration in one company or industry. Does that worry him at all?
Well, I think it should, after what's going on right now. He didn't have to worry about that before until all the stuff with China. But no, I think what he emphasizes is that diversification is for fools. That if you really know the company inside and out, and you can get it at a discount, and it's a great company, it's okay to put in a lot of money into it. He did that with American Express during his partnership days, and he did that with Coke, and he did that with Apple. So I was reading or listening to another guy talk about his decisions that, Warren was talking about. He's made 10 or 12 decisions that really have helped Berkshire the most. And those decisions include people that you hire, the impact that they have on your company. And Ajit Jain, who's the head of insurance at Berkshire Hathaway, is somebody that he talks about at the shareholder meetings every year about how great of a job that he does for the company. But you've got to put your money where your mouth is what he's telling you when it arrives, because it doesn't arrive very often.
What was his biggest professional failure, and what did he learn, and we could learn from that?
His biggest failure was buying Berkshire Hathaway. And he wanted to sell his shares. This is in his partnership days. He had 7 partnerships from 56 to 69. He made 25 million and his partners made 100 million. But one of his, during his partnership year, he, oh, can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, I lost my thought.
I was asking, what was his biggest professional failure and what
Oh yeah,
did
okay. I'm
he and
sorry.
could we learn from it?
Yeah, yeah. He was trying to sell his shares, and I think the offer was 11.50, and the CEO agreed to paying 11.50, but then the paper that he got from the CEO said 11 and 3/8, and Warren was furious that he was trying to screw him out of a few bucks, and so he ended up buying the company and firing the CEO because of what he did to him. And this was because his father just died. And Charlie was saying, you should have talked to me before you did that, and he was saying he did that because his father just passed away. So it's the importance of making rational decisions, maybe having somebody else look at what you're doing before you do it. Because he said he's lost 300 to 400 billion dollars in potential profits because of that blunder.
Interesting. You had a list of all the Berkshire Hathaway boards. How often do they meet and how do they get the most out of their boards? I'm wondering, you know, Warren Buffett has all these boards he's on. How does he get the most out of these boards where they add real value? And how much time can he really spend on these things?
I think he's been dropping off of boards. I don't think he's on as many, but his own board, I know over the past couple of years, he's added a few people. Chris Davis, who's a very famous investor, very successful. Uh, and another guy from Omaha who's an investor, he added on as well. I can't remember his name. His son Howie will take over for him as chairman of the board when he passes away to keep the culture going at Berkshire. He put his daughter on recently as a board member. I think what's important to Warren is that maintaining the culture of Berkshire Hathaway. He doesn't want other people to come in and change what it's been about, and it's not about money. It's about doing the right thing. He's really into doing the right thing, and helping people and being fair and honest and having integrity. Uh, that's why people love Warren Buffett. We go to Warren Buffett whenever there's a huge problem. Who's on TV when the Great Recession happened? When we had the scare of COVID? Who's on TV? Warren Buffett, because we
Um,
can trust him.
yeah, he settles everything down. I remember, uh, I guess maybe in the early '90s, people even talked about wouldn't he make a good president because he had such high trust value.
Yeah, but he's too smart for that. He would never become the president.
Although, as you write, he has significant investments in fintech through banks like Nubank. He and Charlie Munger aren't fans of cryptocurrency. Why is that?
It's very similar to his views with gold. And his views with gold is, it just kind of sits there. And you have to hope that somebody else is going to pay more than what you paid for it. And that would be the same thing with crypto. And Charlie even goes further. Charlie just hates crypto. And he gives his rationale is that a lot of crypto is being used for illegal activity, paying off drugs in the underworld and all kinds of illicit behavior. He calls it rat poison squared.
Yeah, I
They
don't know.
will never invest in cryptocurrencies. Now, one thing that I talk about in the book is that they don't like cryptocurrencies, but they do like the technology, blockchain technology behind it. There is value in that.
Um, what did he learn and from people and businesses working in the family grocery store? How much did that impact the way he invested working in that family grocery store?
I think a combination, not only the grocery store, but all the things that he did as a kid. He got all this great business experience in different industries that contributed to his knowledge. It was like getting an MBA and an undergraduate degree when he was a kid and doing all these different things. And his father, well, he got laid off and lost all the family money, but he did become an entrepreneur and he opened his own brokerage. And Warren was down there reading all these investment books. By the time he was like 10 or 11, he read all the investment books on the stock market in the Omaha Public Library twice. I don't know about you, but when I was 10 or 11,
Yeah.
I was reading Richie Rich comic books, not investment books, you know.
I've heard him talk about luck, and I've seen him and Bill Gates many times talked at conferences when they're on stage about luck and the right place, right time, which every successful person I've ever interviewed says, if it wasn't for luck, I wouldn't be standing here right now, or I was at the right place, the right time, and have credited success that way. Does he believe in the concept of manifesting, that you could want something and make it happen because you want to make it happen?
Uh, I think when he was 10 years old, and we talked about that earlier, and he had a vision of becoming an entrepreneur. That was kind of what you're talking about there. And not only that, but he had a vision for himself of becoming a millionaire by the time he was 30. I would imagine that, knowing Warren, the way I know Warren, that he has done that throughout his life. Now, there's a downside to that, since I'm an entrepreneurship professor, and I know the research on entrepreneurs is they tend to be a little bit too overconfident at times. So they may have this vision, this is what I want, but just because you want it doesn't mean that it can happen. And you have to be realistic about yourself and your ambitions and uh, things of that nature.
You were going to dedicate two chapters of this book to Charlie Munger, but it ended up being one, as your publisher encouraged you just to consolidate. And Charlie Munger was a lawyer. Well, what effect did he have on Warren Buffett as an investor and a leader of the organization?
Oh, Charlie was fabulous. They met in 1958 at a dinner in Omaha. They're both from Omaha. And Warren went back to Omaha for his father's funeral. And this doctor, Davis, invited Charlie to the dinner. And that's where they initially met each other in 1958. And I guess at the dinner, they got along so well. They were laughing so much and they were on the ground. And that's how their friendship started back then. But Charlie, he ended up moving out to California. He went to law school and became a lawyer. He hated being a lawyer. And he actually was doing what Warren was doing, but he was doing it on a smaller scale. And he was making a lot of money doing it, being an investment counselor. And Warren and him kept in touch, and eventually Warren invited him to be the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And Charlie, I think, gave Warren, they were best friends, and they were like together for what, 60 years or something like that. Uh, I can't even imagine Warren, how he feels without being able to talk to Charlie after 60 years of doing this. This has got to be hurting him and his abilities as an investor, in my opinion. And just in life personally. And
I mean, yeah, I mean, it was like a marriage, 60 years.
exactly. Yeah. And
I wondered, why did Charlie Munger, they were together so long professionally, why didn't he have the same amount of wealth or something close to it? I mean, I think I read that when he died just recently, his net worth was 2 billion. I mean, that's a huge disparity between his net worth and Warren Buffett's net worth.
good question. Uh, well, we can speculate on that. That was he, what, at what point was he making decisions? And how much was he making the decisions? Um, I, I, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if I could tell you that. What I've talked about before in a couple other podcasts is I'm not sure exactly what he did in their relationship. Where did all the ideas come from? Were they from Warren? Were they from both of them? I don't think we know that.
But I was curious about, in all those years, you would think he'd invest similarly, that he would just put the same money in that Warren Buffett was. And even if it was a lesser amount, Warren Buffett's worth like 150 billion. You would at least expect him to be worth maybe a third of that, and not even remotely close to a third of that. That's what surprised me when I read about his net worth. But that's all right. What are some of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's keys to success? And you list some of those in the book.
Um, I would say um, my favorite one are don't hang around with people uh, that you don't trust, or that don't have integrity, or that make your life chaotic, or situations that make your life chaotic. And Charlie mentioned this, I don't know, a couple of weeks before he died. He was really emphasizing that, so be careful about who you hang around with. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned from the book is hang around with people that are better than you. Um, it's okay to hang around with people that you've been friends with for a long time, but be careful about who you hang around with. Warren has always been very humble. He gets along really well with people. He has a very high IQ and a very high EQ. Uh, Very, very few people have both of those, but he has those. Another thing that I learned from Warren when I met him was there was something going on in his head when he met me and he was looking at me. And I think trust is a huge issue for him. And I'm thinking that, ever since his childhood, your childhood has such a huge impact on you, with his mother and his father losing his job and everything. And also he had a friend, a really good friend that was in over in a Jewish friend over in Europe during World War II, and they were hiding from the Nazis, and somebody turned him in to the Nazis, and he ended up going to a concentration camp, and he lived and he survived, and he became really good friends with Warren. So, he told me the story over lunch, and so I'm thinking, this guy, when he meets new people, trust is huge for him. And I think it's like that for most people that have a lot of wealth, or that are famous. How can they trust somebody?
Yeah, that they liked him for them and not for what they
Exactly.
would do for them. Yep, see that all the time. What were you mentioned here, and we talk about some of his mistakes, but you have a list of mistakes that he kind of made. Uh, is there one in particular that he was he wished he really regretted more so than anything else?
He says, of course, Berkshire. was his biggest mistake. But he also says that the mistakes of omission were huge, some of them. And I'll give you an example. Intel, he had an opportunity to go in on the IPO of Intel, which he would have made who knows how much money on. Google, an IPO on Google. He didn't invest in Amazon when it was hot. Um, and Microsoft, he didn't invest in Microsoft. I mean, think about all those that he missed out on. But then again, he'll tell you that he just wants to focus on his circle of competence. And that's why he's become so successful.
What are some of the personal lessons you can share with us from you writing this book?
Uh, Personal lessons, I would say that uh, Warren, the first thing Warren would tell us when we walked in to go visit him is the most important decision that you'll make in your life is who you marry. And so, when you're around a bunch of 20 and 21-year-olds, that's a big deal. Probably my favorite thing that I learned in the book that I practice every day now is never say anything negative about anybody, um, and only say good things about people. And I try to shy away from people that do talk negatively about other people behind their backs, because they're probably going to be doing it to you when you walk away. So, and that's from Benjamin Franklin, by the way, and that's a Charlie uh, quote that he always lived by, that he would talk about. Warren measures his success by how many people love him, not by his amount of money. He doesn't need to do that, obviously. He says if you need to make 2x versus x, that doesn't necessarily make you happy, that 2x, and do what you love, work for somebody that you admire, invest in continuous learning, invest in self-improvement. And his self-improvement that he did was Dale Carnegie. He took a Dale Carnegie class and he became really popular and learned how to get along better with people, hang around with people that are better than you. And he'll tell you that, one of the most successful people that he's hung around with was Tom Murphy. He used to run Capital Cities and ABC, and he learned a lot of lessons about management and entrepreneurship from Tom Murphy. Warren's corporate office has 25 people, and he has over 360,000 employees. So I would say Warren's a decentralized management guy, very entrepreneurial. He hires only the best people and he leaves them alone.
One of the things is interesting is that his kids just didn't grow up with great wealth and gave them big trust, and they didn't have to do anything. What's his advice to parents about financially supporting your children and making sure they stay grounded?
Uh, well, I think I could just kind of explain that in a quick story. So Susie, his daughter, came to him after she got married and she wanted to redo her kitchen. And she wanted a loan for like $30,000 or $40,000. And she went to Warren and asked him for it. And of course, you know what the response was from Warren. He said, he gave her the no. No, I can't do this for you. And uh, one thing I've learned about Warren is that he respects people that are persistent and that are very creative. But he also respects people that do it on their own, that make it happen. He's not going to give you anything. And that's one thing that I learned from taking all these trips to go visit him. He wasn't just going to invite me because I wrote him a letter. I had to do something really unique. And I haven't even talked about that, but something outside of the box to get invited to go visit him. So persistence and creativity were probably two of the biggest things I learned from my dealings with Warren.
Here's my last question for you before we let you go. What's it like to be at one of his stockholder meetings? I mean, I hear that's like a hot ticket to go to.
Yeah, uh, it's part carnival, uh, um, part chaos, cult. Uh, it's crazy, but the beauty of it is you've got all these really smart people there from all over the world, and they're there to learn as much as possible from Warren and Charlie. Now it's only Warren. We'll see how that is. But it's really a lot of fun. If you haven't done it, you should do it one day, because you're running out of time. He's, what is he, 93? He'll be 94 in August. But he's not going to retire. He'll do what Charlie did. He'll die being the
Go out on the
CEO.
shield, sure.
He will never retire. I will guarantee you that.
Understood. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I mean, certainly he's one of the great legends in business history, not just now, but throughout the history of the world. And it must be impossible to see another Warren Buffett ever emerge. I mean, with his success record over what, 75 years, something like that.
And I don't think it's just about money either. I think the beauty of Warren Buffett is that he sets an example for all of us on a personal level on how to treat people and to be a better person and to care for others. That's the beauty of Warren Buffett, and we can trust him. He's honest. He's not out to screw people to get a buck.
Understood. Well, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to uh, this great book that's about Warren Buffett. I hope other people get the book. And Todd, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Mark, for having me on. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. All right, everyone, have a wonderful weekend.